I call them dark side entities. I've always called them entities, and they are from the dark side because they plague a person with intrusive thoughts. In other words, you'll be minding thoughts. In other words, you'll with intrusive thoughts. In other words, you'll be minding your own business, and all of a sudden a very dark thought will pop into your head, and it comes from nowhere, and so you don't know what that is. You know it's not coming from you, or at least I hope you know it's not coming from you, because if that's your personality to be dark, well, then maybe it is coming from you. But for most people, they're not running around having dark thoughts. So these dark entities, in my studies, in my understanding, they are the same or very similar to what the ancient texts refer to as the Archons, or the jinn, or demons in the Christian faith. And in the Gnostic faith, they're referred to as the Archons, and in the Muslim faith, they're referred to as the jinn. So these, and in the Native American culture, they're referred to as the Witiko. Now, the Witiko is described in Indian culture as a mind virus, and I think that's pretty appropriate, really. It's because these entities are actually parasites. You can't see them, and that doesn't mean they don't exist. My understanding is they live in a different frequency than what our eyes are able to see, but the visual spectrum is very wide, and anybody can go look up visual spectrum, and there'll be a diagram that shows the entire visual spectrum, and it'll have a little sliver in the middle of what we can see. So what we see in our world is like 0.00001% of what exists. And so the other 99.99999% is invisible to our eyes. But we can't see them. So I think that's where these beings live. They could live in another dimension, I suppose, but I don't really know about that. Anyway, so these entities are parasites, and they will invade your mind, and they can access your memory. So they will come in with some kind of wild and crazy dark thought that doesn't belong to you. If you buy into it, Jerry's referred to them as fishermen. They'll try to hook you into something, and if you bite that hook, well, then they'll just reel you in, and then you're on a road that you don't want to be on. So these entities they're masters at twisting a person's perception, and so it's like the news media twists the perception of the dangers of the virus that they say is going around when there's a 99% survival rate. So how dangerous is that, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of approach to panic too. When people panic, they tend to get in a fear state that makes them more susceptible to this type of proliferation of negative energy, negative entities, etc. So, you talked earlier about, saying that hopefully, maybe if you're a dark person, you said you have these types of negative impressions, but if you're not, then you would realize that they're not from you. Maybe give us an example of some of the dark impressions that a person might have, or even that you had in your own experience that was very telltale and characteristic that, these aren't originating with you.
Well, I'll give you what had happened to me, and then sometime later I got an email from a dear friend of mine who told me the same story happened to her, and I didn't tell her what happened to me. So I was driving down the road, going somewhere, and all of a sudden this thought came into my mind, and it said, I wonder what would happen if I drove over into the oncoming lane. It's like, obviously that didn't come from me, and so, it's like, wow, that was like too weird, and obviously I'm not going to do that, but maybe someone who is not very stable, maybe they might do that. I don't know. That's an outrageous one. But then I've heard stories of, in fact, this has happened to me too. I went traveling to the Redwood Forest in Northern California, and I got out and I was walking around, and there was a beautiful, beautiful area where I stood at the edge of kind of a big ravine. It was kind of not a cliff, but it was pretty steep, and I was overlooking the whole forest, and it was just gorgeous. And then all of a sudden I heard, what would happen if I jumped? It's like, see, I'm not going to do that. I know that doesn't come from me. I don't have those kind of thoughts in myself. But maybe someone who is totally distraught and in a bad way, maybe they might take it seriously and do the deed. So they can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, definitely, especially if they're very persuasive, or if a person, under any sort of circumstance decides to listen to that type of voice. So were you constantly having the types of negative thoughts that were of a caliber that, like, what if I did this, just kind of posing it?
Ignore these things. They don't like it when you ignore them at all. They get louder. They get more persistent. So that thought that you're having, just ignore it and go on. Well, that doesn't work. And I really wanted to find out what this was. They thrive off of negative energy. They have to have negative energy to survive, and they don't have any power of their own. So they have to trick us into feeling negative, having a negative emotion, or having a negative thought. They kind of go together, or being in pain, or being overly distraught. That puts out a negative energy from the individual, and they're right there to suck it up. Now, if it's a really bad attack, once they get through feeding off of you, you'll feel drained. You'll feel tired. You kind of feel lost energy. And I'm sure that anybody who has been in a room where there's somebody arguing, you can feel that in negative energy, right? And then that's their food. So that, I think, is the primary relationship between these entities and human beings. But there's another bigger picture I'm finding since this whole
debacle.
The whole debacle, that's a good word. That's a really good word. The whole debacle that started almost 2 years ago.
Yep.
Since that's happened, I've seen that there's a larger picture to these entities. I think that they have, since they can invade any human being, I think that they are actually a big part of the people that think that they're rulers of this planet. So, because when you watch them, they're coming out with such bizarre commands and expecting everybody to just blindly follow it, which is that's the MO of these entities. They come up with something really bizarre, really distasteful, and they expect you to follow that rule, or follow their orders.
Let's talk a little bit more about these entities. And I know that it might be a little speculative, but why would you think that these types of entities, dark entities that would influence human behavior and feed off of negativity, why could you foresee that they would exist in the first place? What is their entire purpose of existence?
Well, make a lot of us obey, right? Without thinking. That's the entities doing that, I think. So here we are in this process of evolving that can't be stopped. And I think that they're going to push as hard as they can now to prevent this from happening, but I don't think it can be prevented. I think that's what's going on. There's people in the media who are bought and paid for it. They're getting a lot of money for obeying the rules and not talking about the truth, because they're worried about their job over the truth. And then there's people who are compromised because they were caught or coerced into a very bad situation, which if it went public, their life would be ruined, their reputation would be ruined. So there's that combination within the news media and within Congress and everybody else that's in the upper echelons. Well, not everybody, but most everybody. So they are afraid to speak the truth for one reason or another. But, and some of them don't even know the truth. So they think they're saying the truth. They actually, some of them believe what they're saying, but I don't think all of them do. So they are being influenced by the entities for sure, because they're afraid to step out of their cozy little cocoon where they're taken care of, and they don't have to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. They're safe. They think they're safe, but they can be thrown under the bus any moment. They just don't know it. So that's what they're doing, and they're being influenced by these entities who are, saying, thank you very much for lying to these people and scaring them half to death. Boy, we're going to have a feast now, But so they're being ruled by, corporate CEOs or, mafia run organizations or whatever. They're being ruled by that. I think I read somewhere where all of the media they're owned by 4 corporations, something like that.
Yeah, the megacorps.
Yeah. So we've got these major corporations that are kind of running the show. And you can bet that those CEOs are either the entities themselves embodied, or they're being run by the entities. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what I see. The way that you grow up, what you get is your core belief. That's how you think. That's how you look at the world. If we had smaller communities where each community had their own entire system, and they were scattered all over the world, and they were communicating with each other, and there was no big centralized system for anything, electric, gas, whatever, food, medicine, anything. So you had your own autonomous system within your community, and it can be a large community.
Sure.
But let's say that something goes wrong with one of the systems in that community. Let's say the electrical goes down. Well, then you can borrow from the neighboring community until you get yours up and running again. The root problem is these entities, and that we don't know that they're there. And so if we become aware that they're there and they're influencing us, and we can step back and take a look at our thoughts just for a moment. If a person could just do that, then and become aware that these entities are influencing them, we're trying to. The programming that we got as children was a program that was given to us by others.
Yeah.
So we have no idea what we're thinking until we start stepping back to realize, okay, what am I thinking? Is this coming from me or not? They kind of act a bit robotic. In other words, what they continue, they do the same thing over and over again. They have a repetitive program within them. Once they get into your memory, they know what makes you tick, so they can play on that. And once they find something that works with you, they'll stick with that one over and over and over again. So if you pay attention to what they're saying or what you're thinking, what they're inserting into your thoughts, then you can see that they repeat themselves over and over and over again. They just have this routine that they do. And so to me, I got to the point of where, I didn't have any fear of them anymore. And I even saw them, they were kind of ridiculous to me. So I would laugh. And when I laughed, they just left. The other thing that I found that works really, really effectively is what you believe is what you create.
Yeah.
And that's been proven over and over again. Whatever we actually believe in our core belief, that's what we will create. So I just wrote an article about that on my blog the other day.